A writer who doesn't care about the dissemination of his work is like a cook who doesn't care in what restaurant he works in. Jonathan Heath. This is AMI Audiobook Review. I'm your host, Jacob Shymanski, and I have no clue in what context that quote was written in, but it applies so well to what we're talking about today. Is listening the same as reading? It's kind of a controversial question, but authors do themselves a huge disservice if they don't publish an audiobook along with their print books. But today we're talking about the validity of audiobooks as a medium for literacy, and it's something that gets a lot of people riled up. Today we're going through some answers from the book club that we posed this question to them. We got lots of answers and a good variety of them too. I'm not doing this alone today though. Ramya Amuthan is with me too. How's it going, Rams?
Hey, Jacob. Yeah, lots of answers.
Mm.
All across the spectrum, too, because this gets people going, this question.
Right. And the specific question that we asked was, is listening the same as reading? What's your reaction when people are dismissive of audiobooks as a medium for literacy? There's a big variety of answers because you can interpret this question in a lot of ways. Sometimes the question is just simply, can a book be considered to be read if it was listened to an audiobook? Like, it's a semantics thing.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's a literacy thing, like comparing audiobooks to print books, which is better. People interpret the question many different ways, but I think as we go through the answers, you're going to see a lot of the different angles. And I want to, first of all, say thank you to everyone who answered. We got some really good responses here. Do you want to read the first one here? This one by Karen McGee.
Yes. So Karen McGee is one of our colleagues, and she consumes a ton of books. We've had her on here for rapid fire review, so we can actually keep track of how many books she's reading. And she says, honestly, why should anybody care how someone else consumes literature? Were people who dismiss audiobooks never read to as a child? It should not matter whether people read the word on a page or listen to the words being read. In the end, we could all discuss the book. That's a fair point, right? Like, it's more about coming together after having read the book or listened to the book and being able to have discussions about it. I think that's fair. It's level playing field, no matter how you've taken in the book. It's broad strokes, though, here.
Yeah, broad strokes here, definitely. I'm going to be being devil's advocate quite a bit here, because I've spent an embarrassing amount of time listening to or like watching videos about people talking crap about audiobooks and going through like social media threads where people are having this debate. And something people will mention all the time is that, say, I read the print book and you read the audiobook and they were having a discussion on it. The problem that people often have is they kind of have difficulties trusting the other person. Like, did you really read this thing? And it kind of becomes this like test where it's
What if they read the audiobook? Like, if they listen to the audiobook?
because they're dismissive of how much information is being retained in audiobook.
Okay,
And so,
well,
because if they're speaking to somebody who also read the print book, they can be quote unquote like certain that they fully understood everything. I dispute that, but that's the idea that
wow,
there's
that is ignorant. Now you're questioning my mental ability to retain the book because I heard it in audio versus read it on paper? Damn.
it's low-key accusing people of lying.
Hmm.
The other thing is that because we listen to audiobooks, you and I, Rams, we have the ability, and it's absolutely true, to just put it on in the background and not pay attention.
Fair.
Like, we can do that. That's a dumb way of doing it, but it absolutely is possible. I find it very cynical that people might jump to that assumption to say
I
that
guess so.
we put
Yeah.
on an audiobook just to say that we've read a book. Why would you do that? That's
Well,
one,
it's
that's
just,
dishonest, but it's doing nothing for you.
and also, for those of us who consume audio information pretty much relatively generally speaking, right? Like blind and low vision people who use screen readers, we're
Yeah.
taking in information by audio all the time in work and play. So in reading pleasure and reading anything else. I think that it's just, you know, wild to hear that people are like, we don't even trust that you're taking this information in because it's audio and not visual. Hella ignorant.
People have difficulty understanding that somebody, okay, it's more that if you read exclusively print and you personally struggle listening to
Yes.
audiobooks. It's difficult to understand how anybody else could
Mhm.
successfully listen to a book using an
Mhm.
audiobook. It's really hard to wrap your head around. And because there's this stigma that audiobooks are like the cheat code to reading, it's really easy to come to that conclusion that
Yeah.
audiobooks are like reading on easy mode. It's Walmart brand reading. It absolutely is not. I completely disagree with that.
And that's why Karen's line about, whether people are struggling with this because they weren't read to as a kid is actually a valid point. And you can kind of deep dive into that altogether because if you've never been read to, or, your parents or your caregivers or your grandma, grandpa didn't tell you stories when you were a kid where all you did was sit and listen, yeah, that might be a difficult uh, point for people to grasp.
That's another thing that people have difficulties with audiobooks is like that image because they associate being read to as something you do to a child.
Okay. I am a full grown adult and I would rather be read to than anything else. Like audiobooks or just in general. Like I love when people read out loud to me. That was the first way. Aw, had to bring Harry Potter in here. That was the first way I tried to get into Harry Potter. Is my friend, who we'll hear from shortly, read it to me. Like she read it. We would get on phone calls and she would read the book to me over the phone. And we got through like
Over
half
the
the book. That
phone?
Yeah,
Through Harry
because it wasn't
Potter.
available in audiobook at that time.
Wow.
So she's like, "You have to read Harry Potter. Everyone else is into this. It is, blowing up. I'm just gonna read it to you." And she started reading me like several chapters we got through that way.
That's
Oh,
so sweet.
so sweet.
Wow, what a friend.
Yeah, I know. That's nice.
Another response we got from the book club, and mind you, this is to the question, how do you react when people question the legitimacy of audiobooks as a medium for literacy? Danielle McLaughlin, she's a regular contributor on the show, responded, apart from being wrong, people who tell text challenged people doesn't count, audiobooks doesn't count as reading are, um, sorry, people who tell text challenged readers that listening to a book doesn't count are just mean. Who gets to decide what literary is? If you can discuss a book in a meaningful way, you have read it. I love that line, Ramya. If
Yeah.
you can discuss a book in a meaningful way, you have read it.
Yeah.
The way I interpret that is if you can extract the meaning from an audiobook, that means you can discuss it meaningfully. You're not missing anything.
Yeah. This is kind of that book club vibe, right? Everyone go home, read the book, and then come back and be able to chat about it, how it sat with you, if it feels legitimate to you. And sometimes it doesn't, whether you read it in print or listen to it as an audiobook. Sometimes it's like, I couldn't vibe with this book. So,
Whatever you do, though, don't tell your book club that you listen to the audiobook because
why?
there was an article in the Globe and Mail a couple months ago.
Oh, no.
That it was a piece that was submitted by one of their readers who was saying that he was in a book club and he divulged that he listened to an audiobook. We'll include a link to
Hmm.
the article. He lets people know in the book club that he listened to the book in question as an audiobook, and everybody just bullied him. Have you read
Oof.
this article? It pissed me off so much, dude.
Really?
Um, and the guy was like really defensive about it. It was all kind of ugly, and then the comments got real spicy too. So, but all that to say, like this discussion is heated.
Yeah. I know. And it's honestly, there are still moments where I feel like really like in disbelief that we're still kind of at the lower end of the growth spectrum for acceptance of audiobooks, because I'm thinking we have discussions on this show all the time about audiobooks. They're popular, they're mainstream, they're everywhere, and then you hear about this and you're like, oh, okay, never mind, there's a bunch of people who still think audiobooks are fake.
Super dismissive.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
when we make an
That's tough.
episode like this, I'm fully self-aware that it kind of makes it look like we're being defensive.
Aren't
And
we?
I might
No.
I might be a little self-conscious. I'm not gonna
Oh,
lie.
yeah, I
I'll
am
own it.
self-conscious.
I'll own it.
Yeah.
I'm being defensive because I believe it's worth defending.
Yeah.
Um, Hooli McLaughlin is Daniel McLaughlin's husband, and he had a good answer too. Short and sweet. It is not a question I have been asked before, and I can't recall hearing it discussed. However, if I were in such a conversation, I would probably laugh at such a stupid surmise. Nonsense. That's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Huli, I'm not sure how much audiobook you consume, Huli, but, you know, fair, just point. At
I
least
think I
Yeah.
think Danielle made the point perfectly clear. He was just there for the emphasis. He was the
Exactly.
exclamation mark there.
Exactly.
Okay, next one is your friend Sadine. You mentioned her earlier. She sent us a couple of voice messages. Let's play the first one. She has a couple of really interesting points.
Mhm.
Honestly, I think the fact that even Goodreads doesn't have a section for audiobooks that you listen to so you can track the books you've listened to as a part of the books you read shows the level of disconnect that there is and how, again, people with disabilities or people with different abilities are not represented in a space. I think the fact that people are so quick to dismiss audiobooks shows just how much the reading sphere hasn't necessarily opened up to include everybody. The other annoying thing with it is how long it takes for a book or series to go into audiobook versus when they get published. I think they should all be published at the same time together. I know that's not an easy thing to do, but oftentimes it's 6 months to a year or multiple years between you getting a physical book and then getting the audiobook.
Okay, couple things there. Really good point about Goodreads. It would be really
Mhm.
easy for them to include some sort of tag when you add a book to your collection, whether it was the audiobook or not. It even lists all the different editions of a book that are available, hardcover, paperback, or whatever, special editions. They don't include the audiobooks.
Mm-mm.
That's really frustrating. I would love to see people review individual versions of audiobooks because some books have multiple editions of audiobooks with different narrators. It would be really cool to see them do that to legitimize audiobooks, for them to not address to not acknowledge audiobooks as a legit format is kind of frustrating. Really good point from Sadine there. The other thing is when Sadine, when you're talking about how long it takes to get audiobooks done for books, it like the idea is that print books get produced and then like a year or two later you get the audiobook.
Mhm.
For very popular titles, even moderately popular titles, the standard thing to do in the publishing industry now is to have an audiobook ready the day of release. It's becoming more and more common. And so I don't think that's something uh, that's as much as of a problem anymore. Although there's a huge backlist of very popular titles that still have no or very subpar audiobook versions for them.
Yeah, we're still playing a lot of
Mhm.
catch up in the audiobook world,
Yeah.
similar to the audio description world for television and film, right? So
Yeah, it's true.
now, yeah, now we can rely on certain platforms and certain levels of popularity or mainstream to say, okay, yeah, of course the audiobook is going to be released with the other book. Now you get samples, you can what do you call it, pre-buy, pre-order your audiobooks as well. It's super exciting if you're on a platform like Audible, but you're not going to get that everywhere, and you're not going to get that for all levels of audiobooks. There's plenty, seriously, there are plenty of audiobooks that I have searched for and tried to find, and I can't, and I'll settle for the ebook version because that's the closest thing I can get to accessibility. um,
Mm.
and similar to audio description, like you get kind of solid audio description reliability from places like Netflix or even Disney Plus. But when you want to go watch an old movie, something that everybody else would consider a classic, you're kind of, it's a wager on whether you'll find it audio described or not. So a lot of us are playing catch up. And you're talking about backlist, Jacob. I think the backlist is for consumers as well. Like we all are playing catch up on the books that we would have loved to have had available as audio that now we're like excited about that somebody else has probably read 20 years ago.
Sadine had more to say.
That a lot of books are only on Audible and you can't find them on other platforms because Audible exclusively buys them. What if somebody can't afford to do that? Then they don't have access to the space to be able to read, learn, and simply enjoy. Books are not just like for fun or for us to get lost in our own world. Books gives us the ability to learn so much without sitting in a classroom setting to do it. For me, I read because I listen because I have two small kids, and access to reading is no longer something accessible to me in that way. Like I can't sit down with my Kindle or my
Mm.
phone or take the book vacations I used to take where I read 10, 12 books in a week. That's no longer accessible to me. So I spend 250 hours on Audible a month, which I know sounds like a lot. But if I didn't have access to that, I wouldn't be able to consume as much books or as much authors or get into new genres that I'm able to. I think I've made this far too long, but the point is, I'll probably cuss them out because it's not just for able bodied people, but it's for busy moms who just don't have enough time to read their Kindles anymore, or by the time they start reading it, they fall asleep. It's for everybody, and there should be more accessibility.
Facts. She used to go on book vacations. I was very confused about those, but it's true. She'd take like a few days off and just binge read so many titles and come back and be like, oh, all I did was read for like 5 days straight. I'm like, damn.
It is kind of like a vacation when you're traveling
It
to
is.
another world.
Yeah, yeah. But she would also travel and
Oh,
then
okay,
like,
at the
not
same
do
time,
anything but sit there and read. Yeah.
go to France, just sit at a park and
And
read
sit
all
in a
day.
park and just read all day. Yeah, she would love that. But it's so true. And I've, we've had so many conversations, Sadine and I, about uh, Audible credits and finances. And if you don't have
Expensive.
Audible, then what else do you have? Yeah. We're really, really lucky to have Sela
Thank
and
God.
right and Nels, like platforms that recognize print disability and do give you like library adjacent experiences and give you full library catalogs of free books in different formats that are accessible to us. But not everybody has that. We talk about like people who fall between the cracks and who don't get the accessibility um or attention that they need because they kind of fall in that gray area of what it means to have a disability.
The interesting thing with books, print books, and audiobooks is it's one of the few forms of media that doesn't really get pirated. People don't generally
True.
steal books. They don't steal
Yeah.
ebooks. They don't really steal audiobooks. It's not necessarily as much of a problem. And it's kind of nice because as a society, we kind of value them. Do we? That said, that value is very high and
Mhm.
it can get prohibitively expensive, but it can be absolutely worth it if you really see it that way. And within the community, the blind community, thank God for Sela.
I know.
Absolute godsends. The
Say
work
it
they do is
again.
incredible. I
Yeah.
have zero complaints with Sela. Unbelievable service. We're going to shout them out every single time.
Mhm.
Somebody else who's within the community who always uses Sela to get his books is Jeffrey Rainey. He's been on the show quite a few times. Big audiobook listener. He responded to this question as well, saying, being blind, I've been listening to audiobooks since the mid 1990s, getting talking books on 4-track tapes from the CNIB library in the mail. It's not a huge deal to me. Some sighted people find that listening to a book feels like being read a bedtime story. I could read a book myself, thank you. However, within the last 15 to 20 years, audiobooks have become cool and part of the mainstream. I know commuters who used to take CDs of audiobooks and listen to them on multi-hour drives across the province. Now audiobooks are almost seen as interchangeable from podcasts. And blind and sighted people alike use them as background while driving, exercising, cooking, or anything else. I wouldn't call it background. I will fight that. Amazon bought Audible. That's the ultimate signal that these are not just a book for the print disabled anymore. There are web portals for global libraries and collections of audiobooks like Sela and Nels and Bard have knocked down the local barriers of your libraries. This is but one more example of inventions that were created for those with physical and mental disabilities, enhancing the quality of life for able-bodied people all across the globe. Now, if only they realize that they can quit seeing us as aliens. Okay, so a lot there again, shouting out Sela. And he did touch on like the image of a book being read to you. I genuinely think that that's a huge part of people's reservations around
Yes.
audiobooks. Get over yourselves. You can fully embrace a story by being told to you. We do that when we go to the movie theater. We do that when we're watching a movie. You're still being told a story,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Do you dismiss movies and theater as storytelling? No, absolutely not. Nobody would.
Yeah. No, for sure. There's a lot to be said about just the nuanced conversation. And we said this right off the top, too, in this question of is listening the same as reading? And, if there's a big part of you that feels like you need to take full control over how you present the story to yourself and how you need to consume stories, that is a different conversation than like, is listening giving you the same comprehension of something, of a story, of a passage, of a whatever, than reading it to you. And honestly, like, I can understand all sides of the spectrum. For example, Terry Bray says, and the next two responses is kind of in the same vein. Terry Bray says, reading audiobooks is reading. Where the literacy comes in is when people don't use grammar or spell. If the person is blind, using Braille compensates for that. So in other words, if you're reading Braille, that kind of is an adjacent to reading print, whereas listening to an audiobook doesn't give you that same level of literacy, sentence structure, all that stuff. And Marcy Yale, who you had on for Rapid Fire Review recently, she reads a lot of Braille books as well as consumes a lot of audiobooks. And she says, I think audiobooks can be a great way to enjoy literature, but I don't believe that they are a substitute for actual reading, either via print or Braille. Sure, you can learn to understand words by listening, but you can't learn sentence structure, spelling, or punctuation convention. So if you never have to produce anything in writing, enjoy audiobooks. If you, however, have to communicate, then you need to read the words in a more visceral manner, which is, again, kind of going back to what Sidine said. Maybe that's not the point Sidine was making, but I'm going to pull that part where she said, like, listening to an audiobook, reading books, it gives you that learning without having to sit in a classroom and learn grammar, be in English class. And it's true. So if you're not getting the commas and the periods and the understanding of how something is written visually or tactilely, if you're reading Braille, then that is something that you're not grasping from listening to an audiobook, right?
I'll agree with that. Spelling
Yeah.
and punctuation especially, very difficult to learn those things through audiobooks alone. That's one of the benefits of print. You will spell better, you will have better use of punctuation. Grammar kind of goes with spelling, but you can learn sentence structure and quite a few elements of grammar through audio only. If you need to communicate, I'd argue audiobooks are quite good for you.
That's fair. Yeah.
Audiobook narrators are very good communicators. They speak very well, and sentence structure is generally almost perfect in books, right? And it's actually a great way to learn a new language, especially or like practice a language that you're kind of like mid at, so the spelling part is a big thing though, and people get real riled up around that part.
Yeah.
And that's where Braille is legitimately very useful and important for people who are blind, especially if you're blind from a young age, to learn Braille just for spelling, because spelling is important, right? You can't just dictate for the rest of your life. It just takes forever.
I think you can
It also
now.
sucks.
Nowadays, you can dictate for the rest of your life, but
You could.
but you're not learning anything.
Yeah. That's a whole other. Yeah, you're not learning anything. That's a huge debate. Okay. Anyways, one more thing we wanted to get to. AMI's Kelly McDonald also sent in a response.
Regarding your question, it's Kelly McDonald here. I know when I was in school as a kid, yes, that many years ago, teachers would make you feel that listening to an audiobook wasn't reading. And I understood then because I grew up being a pretty lousy speller. In school, they're educating me. They're teaching me not only to be able to follow the story, to be able to tell you about it, but also to be able to read it in the first place, whether you're using print, Braille, or that medium. But people would also disparage listening to books as if, well, you're not really going to get that smart just listening. And I disagreed. I had a very high understanding level. I could follow a story. I could tell you about it. I could explain what was actually happening. And I was pretty good at that even at 8 years old. My father used to read to me. Then I started on audiobooks when I was 8 or 9, something like that. And loved them. A lot of it because of the reader. The narrators really kept me engaged, so therefore I listened more. My comprehension level for words was university level when I was 12. I understood so many words. So people who will say that, I disagree. But mostly anything that gets you to be able to take in a book, and we all learn different ways, whether we read it off a blackboard, a page, whether we have to be told it and have it explained that way for us to be able to retain it. You have to discover that way. And at a young age, I discovered I learned more definitely listening that has served me better as an adult and in my work and my education process through life in any form. Do I spell better? No, it's been a bit of a step back. It's something that I've had to go out of my way to work on. Just like someone who may be a wonderful speller and not know that many words, or be a wonderful speller but can't focus on listening to a prof talk or an audiobook or something that a podcast maybe they're listening to. And there are so many different ways that we can consume, and it really is, I think, learning which way is best for us.
I
Fact.
find it funny when people say that like audiobooks don't work for them. When they say like, oh, I listen for 10 and then after 30 minutes I just drift away.
Mhm.
All I can think of is you might just be a bad listener generally.
Yeah. Like,
Right?
not
What
as a
happens in a
dig.
conversation? No, I mean it kind of as a dig.
Oh, I don't think of it as a dig. I think that for real, like a lot of us are, auditory learners, visual learners, whatever, kinesthetic learners, right? Like you take in information better different ways. For people who are blind and who listen to audiobooks by default, I think that it's perfect if you are an auditory learner to begin with. Maybe it's something you just had to practice and become good at over the years. But what happens if you're blind and you're a visual learner? That's tough for you to start,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
seriously. You can learn. You can learn
You can.
how to listen to audiobooks better. Like
Yeah.
I think I'm a much better listener of audiobooks now than I was, say, 5 years ago.
Right? Yeah.
Kelly does touch on some important things though in his comment. One was that he was a university level reader when he was 12. Okay, Jimmy Neutron. No, but
He
more
doesn't believe you,
importantly,
Cal. I believe you, Cal.
no, he mentioned that he could genuinely understand the book, like what Danielle was saying earlier, like extract the meaning from the book and discuss what was going on. And when he says that he can do that, why would you not believe him? It's
Yeah.
super cynical, right? To just assume that the people who are listening to audiobooks, they don't understand anything. It's really cynical. Have some faith in your fellow human being, for God's sakes. Seriously, we could keep
Preach.
going on. We might do a part 2 for this, Rams.
We might have to.
Rams, we might have to wrap up to you because we're all out of time. Have a good one.
Thank you
Always
so
appreciate
much.
your time. That was Ramya Amuthan. She's a regular contributor to the show, big personality on AMI Audio. It's all the time we have for this edition of AMI Audiobook Review. The show airs weekends at 1 p.m. Eastern on AMI Audio and repeats every 6 hours, but we also make ourselves easy to find. We're on all the big podcasting platforms, and that includes YouTube. You can leave us feedback via email at audiobookrareview@ami.ca. We always want to hear from you. I'm Jacob Shymanski. Happy listening.